VenomousStare back with another 2v2 video. This time we have an exciting macro game between Savage Wood, who's allied with Aztec Warrior, playing against GG Noob, the Protoss player, and a barcode Terran. So this map is a pretty good macro map. The naturals are very easy to take. However, the third bases are probably the hardest third bases to defend in any 2v2 map at the moment. Remember, the cheese map, Shrines of Linzul, has been finally removed from the pool. Now, I actually liked being able to do aggressive builds on a very small map, but Shrines of Linzul got to the point where I'd probably played over 500 matches on it, and I was just really sick of really not being able to do any build except for an exceptionally aggressive build. It was also really hard if you were Protoss against Zerg. It was almost impossible to expand. Really bad map for Protoss. It's definitely a Terran map. So we see Savage Wood opening for a quick wall in and 2 barracks as well as a factory, and he's getting vision on the edge of his bases. This is smart. A lot of new players sort of wonder, like, where should I put my depots just in general, as we see stim start up here for Savage Wood. You always want to wall in quickly, especially in 2v2. And then, especially against Zerg, you want to put them on the corners to spot for Nidus. This is effective against Protoss and Terran as well because it spots for Warp Prisms and Medivacs and early Reaper aggression. One of the most idiotic things people will do in 2v2 is they'll go for these super delayed Reaper all-ins, where usually whenever you see a 3-Rax Reaper all-in, what happens is people will make for the first barracks in a Reaper, and they'll add the second 2 racks and make Reapers and just keep reinforcing and pressuring. And that's how you're supposed to do the build. You constantly wear your opponent down and keep them on the back foot. But in 2v2 you can actually do some idiotic things that would never work in 1v1 but work in 2v2. One of these is going through Rax Reaper and waiting until you have like 6 to 10 Reapers before you go in. And because the attack hasn't hit when it's supposed to, you sort of discount the fact that it can come, and you can lose some pretty stupid games because your ally, quite frankly, will just have his dick in his hand about half of the time. Aztec Warrior has 2 racks with Tech Labs. He's starting his missile turret and he's running out to expand, adding another turret. Now if we look at the amount of units from each red player, Savage Wood's build, even though the expansion is later, it's much more safe. He already has 2 Medivacs on the way. The starport just now starting for Aztec Warrior. He's not going to have a tank anytime soon, even if he starts this immediately, which he should. But Savage Wood does have stim done, and his 2 Medivacs are going to come out, so he'll be able to do a drop quickly. Aztec Warrior booting up combat shields and stim at the same time. And a little bit of Hellion Reaper pressure coming out here, as this is pretty much like a TVZ opening. And I random in, so this guy might think that there was a Zerg. He looks for the natural, says, okay, that's a little weird. Savage Wood does have some Marines up here, but Aztec Warrior is going to be tested, and the barcode Terran player tellies in a BC, and Aztec Warrior just types in dead. This guy, I played with him quite a bit. He's pretty mouthy, pretty annoying. Not that saying dead is mouthy, but I've played a lot of games with him and he's a dickhead. What Savage Wood's going to start to focus the CC is whenever your opponent has everything across the map and is really doing a lot of damage, you want to go for these cutthroat targeting. You don't want to spend your time running around chasing SCVs, because this is going to happen. The Protoss is going to run over and try to help. Savage Wood picks off the initial Stalker, then intelligently focus fires the Sentry, because Guardian Shield is basically like having 2 extra armor upgrades. And Savage Wood's going to stutter step forward and clear the remainder of the Protoss army and continue to go to work on the Terran. Now most of this army has been defeated. Aztec Warrior, all he has to do is really repair and make stuff. However, notice how much money he's floating. He has idle racks, idle factory. Remember, if he had built a tank immediately with the wall in, he wouldn't have taken any damage. Once the BC came in, it might have gotten a little hairy, but really screwed it up badly there. And this guy has this sort of Plat League micro and macro where nothing is really done adequately, yet he always blames his ally whenever they lose. So that's your average 2v2 player at Diamond MMR in a nutshell. You can always tell when someone's plat because after playing really poorly they get really bitchy and mouthy, and it's almost like every single time sort of thing where, oh okay, this guy's being an obnoxious cretin and he just doesn't have any idea what he's talking about, and you look at the profile and sure enough 1v1 platinum. But remember, no one really cares about 2v2 rank. Whenever you talk about sort of figuring out how good a person is, determining their ability, you just completely ignore 2v2 rank and look at 1v1 rank. Now if you have a partner that you're allied with, that you consistently do 2v2 ladder with, then your collective MMR sort of matters, like your 2v2 ladder rank and record together, as we see the barcode Terran trying to rebuild the tremendous amount of damage he suffered. So he went for a very aggressive tech heavy 1-1-1 type build, lost his tech lab, lost a couple depots, and lost his fusion core as well as his base. So Aztec Warrior is just incredibly far ahead of the Terran player. Savagewood's counterattack just did an insane amount. Now as far as Team Protoss goes, GG Noob does have a Robo and a Forge as well as a Twilight, so he's teching up rather nicely, adding a lot of gates. This is some nice standard macro play. In my opinion, you always want to make multiple observers before you go into any other units. A great place is just to siege one up here, and then these areas are strong too, and you can get away with building pylons in these spots to look for drops. The BC is out for the blue barcode Terran. It is worth noting that ever since the battlecruiser got buffed, the battlecruiser is sort of seeing treatment like the carrier gets in 2v2 and in team games, where you oftentimes just see a massing of them, and once the player reaches a critical mass it can be a huge pain in the ass to deal with. Charge is almost done, +2 is about 40% of the way done for the Protoss player, who is building one of the best structures in the game, the Dark Shrine. And Savagewood will continue to aggress upon the Terran player, and the Terran player being forced to telly away here a little bit, and Savagewood is going to start to do some damage in the main again. Sniping add-ons is always very annoying. The BC gets pushed away, but the Protoss player is going to help out his ally here. And Savagewood sort of being kited around by stalkers because of the buildings, and he has to land the Vikings. He'll continue to do a little bit of damage, but a Cyclone comes out there and it will start to mitigate this attack. Now remember, if you're building something, let me rewind. If you're building something and the add-on dies, like this, the Cyclone, even if the add-on dies, since it's queued up, it's still going to come out. And the Cyclone upgrade is being researched here. Little bit of Immortal drop coming. Immortals, of course, are exceptionally good against buildings. But after Savagewood saw the BC, he does have a couple turrets and a couple mines. So we're going to see what this gets done. Now, if we look at this guy's vision, let's see. So this is one of the interesting things about 2v2, is you can sort of be forced to defend your ally when you're not expecting it, and look at that, he just barely loses his prism. Very frustrating there. And Savagewood is going to be 2v1'd here. He's going to try to chase down the BC. And the BC, of course, like the Phoenix now, you don't actually have to micro it at all, you just move command it around and it does damage. So this guy, he's just going to drop into a bunch of Zealot DT, and for no reason he doesn't pick up. I mean, he wasn't even really close to killing this thing. Immortal and BC is doing quite a bit of damage here, but Savagewood finally gets his army up into the main and cleans it up. Kills the BC, kills the Immortal that tried to get tellied out, and he actually moved about half of his SCVs that he had down to his building third. Now Savagewood, of course, did take this base first because of the initial Hellion aggression. Protoss is pushing out here. He does have 2-2, which is a little bit scary. 2-0 rather. Aztec Warrior just now started 1-1. Savagewood doesn't have a very good income after being harassed like that. He's trying to take a third. He doesn't really have the money for 2-2 just yet. GG News is running around the map checking for third bases. He's taking a third base of his own. He does have double forge, so he can really start getting aggressive with those upgrades if he wants to. Once the Protoss player gets a couple upgrade advantage over the Terran, the Zealots become a huge issue. They almost feel like Ultralists in a way, where your bio just can't seem to kill them. Savagewood does have a bunker, and intelligently he's starting to repair his medevac, something a lot of people neglect to do, but he still does have some defense in his main here, expecting a drop or a BC, and he's thinking about venturing out and taking this fourth. This turret's cute because sometimes people will fly observers over here, or they'll fly warp prisms over into the main. Not everyone will be very diligent about sort of shift clicking it around the very corner, the dead space. So GG News is going to run in here, and Savagewood is going to be just jumped on by Zealots, and his ally isn't really going to do much. As we see, his follow is very late. Savagewood has to ping a couple times. Savagewood does still have some Marines up, and he held that up before his ally even fired a shot. This Colossus poorly rallied, and you want to sort of split like it's a Baneling, sort of like Savagewood tried to do, but it's a little too late. GG News just does not have very good micro. Now, one thing that you have to always consider in StarCraft is how you balance your micro and your macro, and we can see that GG News more than once has sort of been caught with his pants down, in terms of he'll still have stuff out on the map and he's looking at his own base or microing something else on the map. You always have to remember that if you have money units like a Prism or a Colossus on the other side of the map, you have to be wary. And Aztec Warrior is now going to take his turn dropping into the Terran main. And even though that there was a tank sieged up, Aztec Warrior doesn't really know how to play. You can tell he gets his stuff stuck on the factory. And even though he throws a disable out, it doesn't do a whole lot. All he'd have, when tanks are in a position like this, you can just run away. Run away, siege the mineral line, attack somewhere else. Speaking of attacking somewhere else, Savagewood is going to press up into the Protoss third and start to focus these Stalkers. And one shield battery, one cannon isn't really going to do the job here. And if we look at the vision of GG Noob, once you're on 3 bases, you want to go ahead and add more gates. You can really support about 8 gates on 2 base, so once you take your third, you want to add a few extra more, especially in this matchup whenever you're going to find yourself making Zealots a lot. So pretty much no damage was done. The barcode was distracted, which was nice for Savagewood because he crushed the third. And now he is ahead, and his ally Aztec Warrior is going to take a third of his own. Savagewood starting to add more barracks. Considering this is a mech Terran and a Protoss, he should probably go for Marauders here. Marauders, they really add a lot more forgiveness. Savagewood is going to try to do a little bit of an elevator play with this tank on the low ground, but the Protoss player does have quite a few Zealots as well as the Colossus. And Marines, because they have so much less health than Marauders, really just get shredded by tanks, Colossus, and Zealots very quickly. Marauders are more forgiving, and they do bonus damage to armored. It is going to be Tech Labs for Savagewood, and notice he does have a turret, a little bit of a Sim City to stop Zealots, as well as a couple bunkers. This base pretty much always gets attacked. I almost make it a PF in every game, but because this is my natural that I floated out, a couple bunkers is necessary. So Savagewood is going to get attacked by the blue player, the blue Terran. And this base is going to have to be cancelled. Savagewood jumps in the bunkers, but with this much mech it is very scary, very hard to hold off. The Protoss comes in here too as Savagewood gets 2v1'd until Aztec Warrior finally arrives and doesn't siege his tank, and storms come down. Aztec Warrior basically bathes in him like it was Joe DiMaggio getting a shower from Pete Rose. Savagewood stimming forward here, trying to focus fire the tanks, but the Blue Flame Hellions actually do pretty damn well against Bio with support. And with Liberators coming in too, this is getting very precarious for Savagewood. There's no point in getting this bunker as nothing is in range of it. Aztec Warrior does kill one tank, but he's going to trade here. The Protoss player has double expanded, and now he's going to retreat and start to defend those expos. And we can see just how much Aztec Warrior is floating. Lots of money. Lots of gas too. Now as Terran, it can be very hard to spend your gas, and Terran players will frequently, especially Bio-Terrans, fall victim to not being able to spend your gas. But one of the things that I've learned about playing Terran is when you go into the late game, you need to add extra factories or extra starports so you can start to get gas tech units. Liberators with range are my favorite types of these units, as we see 3-3 being started for Savagewood, very important. Aztec Warrior only starts one of the upgrades. And these forges, it seems to me as though he's only been upgrading on one forge consistently. The armor upgrade is just incredible in PvT, especially with Zealots. In fact, it was a very common strategy for Protoss players to actually get multiple armor upgrades whenever they were going for Zealot styles, which is what this guy GG Noob is going for. Terran player, the Barcode, finally has a third base established, and he's mule hammered it. Really poor upgrades here on these Terran units though, as he was harassed very heavily and just recently got an armory. Rocks being collapsed here. I don't actually know how good this is against two Terrans because a lot of times people just siege you with tanks. That's one thing you have to be wary of with rocks, is you can sort of like, oh, it's more defensive to have rocks between my opponent and I, but people are going for tanks or ranged liberators, a lot of times the rocks become a detriment. And Aztec Warrior says, okay, let's group up and push. Savagewood does have the medevac boost upgrade, which I really like to get that when I'm going for ranged liberators because I'll have a starport with Tech Lab before I finish my fusion core, and it's a cheap upgrade that's pretty useful. And both the Terran players are going to scream up here. And storms all over the army of Aztec Warriors. This guy pretty much doesn't move whenever he's blanketed with storm. He just has a few tanks left, loses all of his bio, but Savagewood is going to deal tremendous damage onto this Protoss base. However, he is going to lose his third base, trade it off, and Aztec Warrior says, hey dude, I know I lost everything bathing in storm, but I got this. He's going to fly his Vikings into a cannon, brilliant. Siege his tanks up, and Savagewood runs back, but as he does that, the Barcode Terran sort of says, shit, I'm going to get attacked next, I need to retreat. And GG Noob is running back with DT Zealot, and what do you want to bet this guy doesn't scan? Savagewood is going to attack Terran now, because he ran all the way back and can sort of deduce, okay, well yeah, he retreated, so that means I can be aggressive again. Because presumably he retreated to try to help his ally. And a scan, finally, everything but the damn BCs died. Savagewood snipes the base, which was intelligent. Remember, he sniped the main very early on. And there's often a question of, what do I attack whenever I'm harassing? Workers or bases? Well, when you have this much 3-3 bio, you pretty much mow through it all. But if you have enough damage to burst down the bases, it's actually worse than losing workers. Savagewood does lose a little bit of misplaced army, because look at this. This guy pretty much has no economy left. This guy hiding behind a barcode like a coward. He has two bases with pretty much no minerals left, and yeah, he can float off a CC if he wants, but a lot of times on this map you want these bases to be PFs if possible. Because if you have a fourth tier and your ally has a fourth tier, it's sort of hard to defend both, so if you're Terran, one of the best things you can do is make it a PF. And you can see here how affecting sniping bases is, as opposed to running inside and sniping tech or trading army, because the Terran's basically dead. He doesn't really have any income, and he decides to leave because he's aware of the fact that, look, like, I'm pretty much broke. I'm out of money, and I'm not going to be able, if I do a little floatsy maneuver here, fine, but there's no way I'm going to be able to hold it. And Savagewood is pumping 3-3 bio. He's continuing to expand. He has this base flying south. Now, this is very dangerous in 2v2. Whenever you have a player who leaves, that means that their ally suddenly gets control of their entire army, all their production, and all their bases. And oftentimes the player will have a lot of income, so suddenly you will have a player who basically has like 8 base income. So it's just a huge power spike if your ally leaves and he's not completely dead. So whenever someone leaves in a 2v2, don't take your foot off the gas and think that you've won, because especially if the ally's bad, suddenly they have a big idle army that their ally can control. All of the production, which it takes sort of a good player to macro 2 complete different races and bases effectively, but most importantly it's that income. If someone gets pissed off because they lose an army and then they leave and they have several bases up, it's like the person, their ally that they left the bases to, is going to have like unlimited income. And Savagewood is probably going to try to come over and help his ally, but there are too many tanks. So one of the best things that you can do is snipe the bases, and we can see Savagewood picked off the main again. And the reason you want to snipe the bases is because, especially with, oh lord, as we see Savagewood tries to run in his bio, and this is why TVT is my worst matchup, is I'm very impatient and just sort of say, yeah, I can kill that, Marauders are really good. And then the tanks, even with shitty upgrades, cut me to ribbons. But if you can snipe the CCs, it makes it a lot harder on your opponent, because not only do they not get that income, they can't do Mulehammer play, they can't do scans. It's pretty much the most easy to access, easy to use utility foiled. And like we said, because we limited the 3rd and 4th, not only did we cause the barcode to leave, but it sort of became one of those things where he didn't have a lot of active income to begin with. Very sad sight there. But Aztec Warrior is pushing in the meanwhile, as these tanks are sort of sporadically put out where they were left. And it is very difficult to control 2 different races of armies, especially if you don't off-race. Like, this guy's clearly having trouble just maintaining his bases. And it's sort of this thing where he's being pressed by 2 different people. That's when it becomes very hard to keep up with the multitasking. And it just gets to a point where you sort of don't really have a bearing on everything your ally made or what they were doing per se. But he is grouping up at the tanks. Nice little spotter depot there from Savagewood is going to show him where the enemy is. And Savagewood just now getting that fusion core. That's actually pretty late. And Savagewood saying, okay, he has a lot of tanks, I'm not going to run in with my bio first this time. I actually have enough liberators to get my siege on. And here, whenever you have very little anti-air to do with your liberators, even though it's tempting to kill all the tanks, you need to focus the anti-air first, because once the Archons die, you can just rain hell down on your opponent. And Savagewood is going to scan to try to kill the DTs. And if DTs run out of your scan radius, you can run back into the scan when you're right on the edge, and the AI will automatically pull the DTs back in unless the Protoss is actively microing them. Aztec Warrior here has a ton of gas, lots of energy on his CCs. The red team is going to push up into the 3rd base, as we see a Void Ray as well as a Protoss ground army come out. And Aztec Warrior didn't have his tank siege, didn't have him ready, but Savagewood gets the Liberators down, gets the stim down, and starts to do his thing. Aztec Warrior says, hey, you forgot your lib. Savagewood, oh, right. Of course, if they're in siege mode, the control army hotkey will not pull them to your army. This is a nice sensor tower. This is a very dangerous high traffic area on this map, because frequently players in the late game will have both of these bases, and this will be a very contentious part of the map. Also, it sort of sees the middle, which before you kill the rocks, units will trickle out over here. And Aztec Warrior has a sensor tower of his own. It's funny because sensor towers have always been incredibly good and underutilized, but the fact of the matter is you see them more in 2v2 than you do in 1v1. Really, the only time we saw them a lot was when people would go turtle mech, which is so stupid because even when you go bio, they're incredibly good. Speaking of incredibly good, we have a plethora of Liberators with range that are about to have +2. And this is very similar to having like 10 tanks sieged up, where you're never really going to be able to attack into it. It's just so difficult. So what Savagewood is doing is essentially killing the 3rd base, which he knows the natural and main aren't mining anymore, but more importantly, he's going to siege the ever-living shit out of this ramp. So it's going to be nearly impossible for the Protoss to wheel back and defend. And whenever he did a recall, well, he didn't recall into his main, did he? DT Shrine is finally polished off, and Savagewood is going to ravage the main base. The Protoss player is going to go for a desperation counter. Remember, he went double forge, so he should be at like 3-1-3, not 0-1-3. And he will run down here and attack this PF of Savagewood. Savagewood does have another one. Notice he does have turrets, so he will be able to see DTs. And with the Shift A move here, Savagewood doesn't have to worry about microing his main army. And he's going to bring back some Liberators, and Aztec Warrior is going to bring his army over. And even though repair was occurring, the base dies. Savagewood says fuck it, rebuilds it right in the face of the Protoss, and that's going to be the game. As Savagewood is ripping through the main still, and there was no way the Protoss was going to be able to defend it. Make sure you sub for more.